Yes.
I don't have much of a technical background, so I want to keep this discussion more on a conceptual or even philosophical level, maybe with some technical input. Because what the name of the session is called Aggregation and Serendipity in a Decentralized Way. And if anybody remembers in the 90s, when the search engines didn't exist, or were very basic, and people started to go around the web through Yahoo. There was this idea of, for example, doing a web ring, which is like a couple of sites have the same topic here, Backstreet Boys or whatever. They just link to each other, and you had that idea continuing. Log rolls, and now obviously you have like your own personal stream in your social media, which is centralized, that sends you recommendation what's interesting. And the question is, if you want to have an infrastructure that's with decentralized sites where you want to enable them to get traffic and to communicate and to find new things. The question is how you're going to do that. As web mentions, is one of the things. We have this thing I wanted to show you, which has been around for pretty much since the start of the German blogosphere in 2005, maybe. It's an aggregator. It's called Riva, like the river. And at first it was only blogs, and it was just tracking which blogs are talking to each other. So it was basically tracking pingbacks. Obviously now that's different because the blogs didn't grow as much as the content portals did. So what you have now is you can see what regular articles from news sites are talked on the blog, or also on social media. It also aggregates tweets, Twitter mentions of a certain URL, and in some cases, if you allow it as a portal, it also can aggregate the Facebook discussion and shows it under the item. So that's like a very basic thing, and it's more like for the people who are tech aware, so they get the news. So it's a lot about technology news in it, but it's a way to aggregate. And another example here from the States that you may know is Dave Weiner's. I think it's also called a blog river. He's just putting different RSS feeds together and makes them available not only as a river, not only for himself, but also for people who visit the site. So this is like, and you can also do that for yourself, but he does it, and River as well does it through whitelisting because of spam reasons, probably, or because of certain reasons in this case. But you can do that for yourself, but you only can do like New York Times and the stuff that he follows. So these are like two different ways of doing it. But what I want to discuss with you is how finding content in the social media age is working, and how we could build an infrastructure where indie blogs or blogs that are self-hosted can get more attention, and bloggers can get more attention. Who else is writing about something? Obviously now the infrastructure is more or less Twitter and Facebook. The question is, what can we do? For example, I don't know more about web mentions, but this is also in a way an activity stream, right? So you could also, but the question is, would I be interested in reading someone else's activity stream? So that's where I wanted to open up the discussion, and maybe you know about similar ideas or projects that are already in works or have worked in the past.
There's a couple of things I can point out. Go to news.indieweb.org.
Mm-hmm.
This is an aggregator. It's for the IndieWeb community. Click on one of the languages, English or most. So anybody can submit articles to this, and it's meant to look like an aggregator, like Hacker News or Reddit, that kind of thing, where it doesn't actually host any of the content itself, it just links out to people's blog posts. But it's meant to be easy to add things to, but it's you do it like in an IndieWeb way. So if you want to add a blog post, like there's no accounts. You don't sign up for an account.
Mm-hmm.
You go to your website and you make a post, and that post is how it's syndicated here. So like I can syndicate one of my own posts here, or I can actually like bookmark somebody else's and tell it to go post it here.
Mm-hmm.
But then this acts as that sort of discovery of I'll find things on here that are very highly relevant from people who I am not following myself, because other people are submitting stuff to this as well. So I like it from that aspect. This is obviously it's much more of a curated and even more than a whitelist, because it's not following everybody's blogs.
Mm-hmm.
It's individual posts being submitted here. So this is meant for like super high signal, no noise, right? Whereas like a Planet where it's just pulling in everybody's posts is much more noisy, because like I write blog posts about the whole variety of topics. They're not always interesting for everybody in all of those circles. But yeah, this is another approach, and this has been live for a long time.
So I can submit something that has the topic of that's about IndieWeb in broader sense, and I post the link and somebody's moderating it, or it's
not moderated. You just post a link. You have to post it to your site. Mm-hmm. So you make a blog post on your site, linking to the thing you're trying to post.
Mm-hmm. So the question in these cases is always, what I like about the idea is that you have, as you said, not a lot of noise. The question is, to which degree can you scale something like this? Because like web mentions, as I understand it, correct me if I'm wrong, is something that's like, in a way, it's the same principle as pingbacks, but pingbacks have this huge spam problem by the time. So the question is how you can avoid spam, and how can you make it attractive for people who are not power users, who don't like.
So I think there's like, I'm always hesitant to use the word scale when talking about this stuff, because I think that scale is not always the goal, as has been demonstrated. Like Twitter is operating at scale, and Facebook's operating at scale, and it turns out people actually don't want that, right? Like I don't want to follow everything every one of my Twitter followers posts. That is just not a thing. Most of us even want trying to follow the whole home timeline at this point. And instead, what I want is I want to follow. I like to follow things by very high signal, low noise, keyword matching, not necessarily whitelisting blogs of people, but I want to only see blog posts that mention certain topics. So like when I read Twitter, I actually don't go to Twitter. I just have a bunch of searches running for various terms, and I read the search results. So I'm finding new people all the time. They're talking about things, but it's always relevant. And what I want is I want that, but for the whole web, right? Mm-hmm. I don't want to have to follow everybody's blog and like either read all those or filter out each of those manually. I want to just say, hey, I'm interested in this set of list of words, and I want to be alerted when new items match those words across everybody's blogs in the whole world, right? So like Google Alerts is an actual example of this. Like you can just type in any term into Google Alerts, and they'll email you when they find something in a crawl that matches that. So I kind of like that approach, right? Because it again gives you a high signal, and you know, with not a lot of votes. So I think this is a little bit more on the extreme end of like it's very low volume. First of all, like if you look at the dates on this is like we're looking at like a list of 12 items and it's over a couple of months. So I want more than this. I want to read more content than this, but the even just like the river of all the blogs that Dave Weiner's following is too much to follow. The other thing I've been experimenting with is so in the IndieWeb IRC channel we have Twitter search running for anytime anybody mentions IndieWeb or a couple of other keywords like some of the specs. I actually like when those pop into the IRC because it's a nice way to like again find people that you weren't following yourself when they're talking about this. And I set up a similar alert using Superfeeder, which is a you know indexes RSS feeds basically, and it's also doing a search for IndieWeb. It has a few more false positives, but those are glitches, something. But I actually what I want to get to is I want to be able to post. I want to be able to host a feed that you can subscribe to that is those same results. So you can add that more curated list.
So make the back end to front end. To open the question, to open to all of you, what do you think would be the best way to build those kind of nodes in a way?
Even better, like what do you use right now that actually does this in a way that you think is good or bad? Like let's start with like the concrete examples. Like those are good examples of sites that you've used. I also read Hacker News. Like other aggregators or similar things or other models that we haven't talked about that anybody's using. How do you read content online, right? Like how do you find stuff?
Well, just as an example, and I don't necessarily depend on it, is the who to follow friend on Twitter, right? One can imagine something similar for IndieWeb. I'm not sure if that strictly falls in this.
Do you find it useful?
Usually not. I mean, like, yeah, honestly, like 95% of the time, not. But I'm also really picky about following.
I find that most of the results there are people who I thought I was following already. Otherwise, it's not super useful.
Yeah. Usually, I follow people from retweets of other people. Probably that accounts for the vast majority.
On Twitter.
Right, on Twitter.
Right. So the question is, how do you find people who are on Twitter?
Right.
Because frankly, everybody is.
I mean, if we work from the assumption that I think it's useful to let's just make the assumption that people do have their own blogs and microblogs and are posting there because it is true and it's more and more true, especially as services like micro.blog launch. How do we find those people? Because it is actually happening, right? And Twitter gets to cheat by just having the database of all tweets immediately accessible. And in a distributed context, we don't have that available.
It's not the cheat. That's Twitter, Facebook. It's social network.
Yes.
And that's the thing is that everybody having our own in the weblogs, there's no social network that connects us. So how do you get those kind of effects when you hear about people talking about things or?
So I think the repost example is actually a pretty good one because it turns out that if people are finding new people on Twitter by seeing what people are retweeting, instead of using Twitter's own who to follow feature, like that's a sign that that's an effective mechanism, and we can actually recreate that. Like it's totally possible to repost somebody else's content on your own blog. It's a very common pattern, right? Like Tumblr's had it built in for years.
We're using that retweet mechanism versus follow means that you're sort of following your nose rather than somebody else's algorithm. And that's what makes that more powerful. I don't know, we can reliably create an algorithm that would produce a do follow kind of feed that wouldn't inherently be limited in a way that is problematic. This is a question of serendipity, this one of the words of this discussion. How do we actually get that? How do we sort of serendipity? It's not structured by someone else for us. It really is having to live in a context where we can follow our nose, interact with, and the content that we want to see. And the other problem there being volume. It's the volume. I guess so.
I feel like serendipity is almost the opposite of that, though. Like, follow your own nose, very often you're just going to get more of what you want. It's hard to.
Yeah, it's viewpoint echo chamber.
Yeah, it's kind of an echo chamber thing. And, Facebook has the same issue with their algorithms. That like if they would just throw something random in there every once in a while and you have to see what you wanted, then you would have kind of serendipitous moments. But
The problem is though, if it's not your notes that you're following, are you really going to intend to?
I don't know.
I mean,
Sometimes you do, and sometimes you don't. That's kind of what serendipity is, right?
there are people who make it a point with yourself that they not necessarily going on in this direction. It's just so there is. You have to put aside that, and I don't know that you can structure that for people, create content, sort of push people.
But Google, what was that thing you used to do? Type in Google, you just want something. What is it? It's like,
I'm lucky.
yeah, I feel like lucky or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting, I think it's an interesting discussion talking about whether completely random things thrown at you versus crawling is better, but ultimately, like, it's not actually a very practical discussion because you like either you can do it or you can't do it, or like neither of them is ideal. So like maybe the answer is just we do a bunch of different things, right? So what?
That's a great idea. We create a search engine that returns into a search return that is completely unrelated to the query.
Yeah.
We call it the WTF search.
That's yeah. But I mean, things we can do is building an IndieWeb search engine indexer of people who are blogging about IndieWeb, so that it's able to go and crawl and find things that we wouldn't find by manually reading feeds. Like that's one way to find new people. I actually think that community aggregators are a really important piece of this ecosystem, and it's not super explored yet. Indie News was my first attempt at it, but I actually am trying to recreate the concept again. But I think the reason this seems important to me is because it happens again and again that these things are created in some form, and that's the thing people flock to. So Mastodon, this happened with Mastodon, which I found really, really interesting. Everybody know Mastodon? Kind of, okay. It's an open source app meant to essentially replicate Twitter, but decentralized. And started by one guy. It's actually pretty well done. It has a reasonable user interface. and it's relatively easy to install. So you've got a lot of things right, and it even speaks open protocols that existed, and it's not, you can make it its own protocol. Classic problem with these kinds of things, they make up their own protocol, and then that software only ever talks to itself and other installations of that software. But this software interoperates with GNU Social and some of the other ones that have been around for a while. So, all that said, what ended up happening was it got really popular all of a sudden, like in March, and communities were finding it, and then somebody would install it for the community, and then everybody in that community would join, make an account on that system, and start using it instead of using Twitter. That's great, okay, but as things progressed, it turns out, people belong to more than one community. It's just a thing. So as a person, I would end up with, all right, I'm going to join this Mastodon because I'm in community X. Now I'm going to join this Mastodon because I'm in community Y. And because like the other people in the community are there, or the way that site is run is different depending on the community, or it just looks different, like they add some custom CSS to it, whatever. So people would end up joining like 5 or 6 Mastodon instances.
It's like Slack channels.
Yeah, totally. And the crazy part about this to me is that is like the exact opposite of what Mastodon is trying to do. Like the whole point of Mastodon and the specs it's based on are that you just have your identity and you just follow anybody, like decentralized, like a decentralized Twitter. And what ended up happening was not that, which I think is pointing to something that's really important about people, is that they're based around communities. And people want to be part of the community. And so it's not even that like people were trying to keep their identities separate. It's just that there were too many incentives for joining a server that people would just join and make a new identity. And like I don't want to play that game. I want to have my main identity, and I want to follow everybody. I want to be able to be followed by everybody. But I think this is just pointing to a really important driver of how people work, and essentially, one of the reasons people would one of the reasons people would join these servers is because the way the software works is it would show you what they call the local timeline, which is basically like, remember when Twitter had the global timeline of just literally every tweet was on the homepage? It's that, but for everybody who's on that server. So if you have like a relatively small community of like maybe 300 people, then the whole feed of everybody posting everything is actually going to be probably mostly relevant, especially when the point of the server is that community. So like if we had an IndieWeb aggregator that was people posting stuff about IndieWeb, it would be mostly relevant. And like you wouldn't post everything you write online because that's the one for that community. So I think there's something to this idea of highly topical community-based hubs, but I don't think it needs to be conflated with identity. Like I should be able to use if I want to have one identity on the internet and use it to post to everything, that should be possible. If I want to silo my identities and separate them out and have multiple, I should be able to do that. It shouldn't be linked to the fact that I'm using a community hub. But I think people really, really want these community hubs because they've shown us when given the option of having software that has almost solved the problem of decentralized Twitter, they don't use that. And they instead use it as community hubs. That's a lot of background of why I think, so this is not quite the right execution of it, but this is similar, and I'm trying to work on the next iteration of the idea of, I want it to be easy to create a community hub where anybody can post content there very easily from whatever software they're already using. So I think that's going to be, I think that's really important for, and then finding people becomes, I don't have to go as an individual, I don't have to go find everybody I want to follow. I can just follow this community hub and assume that that community is responsible for maintaining and keeping out spam and keeping the signal good.
So the community hub
integrate with Twitter and the other, so it's shared across?
Integrating with actual silos like Twitter is, I think there's some considerations to keep in mind there as to whether or not it's actually a good idea. Like, first of all, like how do you do it? Like, I wouldn't want to just have someone's Twitter account added because either they don't know that's going to happen, or I don't want all their tweets. I only want certain tweets. I do think that maybe searching for keywords on Twitter and adding those to the aggregator would be useful, because that's how our IRC works right now, and I actually find that pretty useful. But yeah, I'm not quite sure. I'm not quite sure what form I want this to take in the end either. But there's something there.
Say shared identity of being able to log into the community hub using different Twitter or Facebook, or using, like you were showing before, using my IndieWeb accounts.
Yeah, so like if you have a website, then that's what you want your main identity to be, then you should be able to log into this using that. And it shouldn't matter whether that's WordPress or just a site or whatever. We've got that building block pretty well established. But the other thing is, like, maybe there is no login. Maybe it's just public feed and post stuff and post on your own site. Like, maybe you don't need an account, right? So, like, challenging the assumption that you need an account in the first place.
Like instead of sort of a certain topic on my site, you post it there, everything.
Totally, yeah. So like WordPress has the categories, right? So like, I think a great example of this would be, like you want to add yourself to this mini hub, so you make a category in WordPress, and then you add that category, and then you can choose which post into the hub, and you do that by checking your category checkbox.
I find the idea about the question about the taxonomy you have, these hubs, is almost a philosophical one, because the way, especially here in America, but everywhere now, we have started to identify in a very, very special way. You know, it's not like a village community where you meet people just because they are geographically near you and you don't have any place else to go, but they have to have certain interests, and nowadays these interests are often identified with politics. So that makes it very hard to wrap your mind around how we make the taxonomy for that, and how we make the interaction that it doesn't become, all the people who like the same things just come together and do the stuff they do on the other platforms. And then they don't have to, and they don't need to come, because they can have the same in their Twitter group, in their Facebook group, or on Twitter. So that's really very interesting and very challenging, to design such a system that maybe tries to take a different perspective from, as far as interests are concerned, and still takes into account that we are people with very special interests nowadays, very eclectic. We know what we want, as you said.
You know, there are sites or systems that are based on, traditionally in blogging, this has always been based on curation. And we talked some time ago, we didn't really actually involve the idea was a curator might like to have multiple feeds or an ability to add some unlimited number of feeds to a system that they're managing, and then be able to select individual posts from those feeds. I don't think I've ever seen an implementation like that, but
someone who's publishing a curated.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah, and actually, some people are just very good, very effective curators.
Yeah.
And people will come to them for the curation.
Jeremy Keith does a pretty good job of that, actually. Go to adactio.com/links.
Spell it.
ADACTIO.com/links. So he is, I think, a good example of this. So he, I don't know how he follows things, but he's following a lot of different blogs, and he will post bookmarks on this page of other stuff. So this is it's a fun thing to follow because you get to find things that you wouldn't otherwise know about. But he always posts a little bit of his own text too, along with the links. I guess this was
like a public board.
yeah. I think the term is link blog from back in the day.
Yeah.
And like that's the term that captures this pattern of posting links to other people's stuff with a little bit of your own text, which is it's a little bit more than a repost because it's not actually reposting someone's article here, but it's like this is only external. This is not like he's not writing a blog post about his own ideas, right? But yeah, I think there are always these people who do this kind of thing well. They're scouring and looking for stuff, and then they curate it.
Yeah, I mean, it's a little bit based on the whole catalog and the quarterly publications. That's how reviews were done there. A lot of some of the early bloggers were influenced by that structure where you say a little bit about something and then you talk more about it. And
So a bit of this and then where it came along.
Yeah, exactly. That's like
A little bit of commentary. I like
Yeah.
sweet.
that's like the function of a long Twitter, but obviously now that you don't get the pure timeline,
Right.
if you don't opt in for that, you don't have that as well. So you're and same for Facebook. So these platforms are basically based on power laws. The question is, what possibilities do you have on the web to make hubs like this that have different things in it? Because this is like a very personal feed.
I was looking at that Dave Weiner blogger
Mm-hmm.
blog, whatever. What's it? Bill thing called the River of News.
Mm-hmm.
It seems like that kind of idea as well, where it's basically there's no standard versus needs set up to be. So his is sort of circle of bloggers that did and has always followed like Aaron Fireball and all those guys. Apparently. But then you have the possibilities to set up a thing like
But he's got that river.html, but he's also got, I think we were looking at earlier, bloggers.scripting.com.
right.
I assume that they've set that up. I'm not sure how it's structured.
The very bottom of that long page, there's a link to the open source node project called River.
So
Link
the
is
river
actually
is all
old,
this.
so follow it all the way to GitHub.
Mm-hmm.
Over 5. Links for 4.
So the same.
Yeah, what's the bottom? Start with
River 4.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, things like microblog are enabling the same thing. The question is always, how do you build hubs and build a community around them. And what does community mean when a lot of the community functions are basically centralized? I mean,
if you had, so if there was like a community aggregator or a bunch of them for the communities you're part of, what would you expect? How would you expect to be able to add stuff there in a way that's easy? Things that you're writing. Like, do you think the WordPress model of like check this category and it goes there? Or would you expect that it would just be like doing its own keyword matching so that anytime you're posting anything, you know, certain words will show up? Would you expect that you have to actually go and write it somewhere else, post it there, or like manually add? Like I don't know, there's like various ways to do that. But what would be the way that you would want to do
Sort of opt-in category tag approach.
I feel like there's some worlds there where you are choosing like tags and stuff, the kind of taxonomies that you're setting up to organize content on your site, and having that be the way you communicate whether something should go somewhere else. It just seems like at least something a bit more than on.
If you want to have a community, protect a community site where everybody connects to it, or do I want to have my own where I can build my own?
I guess those are both things. Those are two different ways of approaching it.
there's always spam. That's like the,
Control spam lines.
and scale means just that you have to have someone human taking a look because the system can be gained big enough that it's worth to game it. I'm not sure that these community hubs are going to be that big, not because everybody's on the platforms, but because in general, I think we're going to see a return of smaller communities in general on social media because it's become so toxic and so big. So, question is around what people are going to organize. But again, the taxonomy and we identify ourselves.
Another pattern that we haven't talked about is the topical forums, which there's still plenty of that are very active, where you join a forum and maybe it's a private forum, even public content, you log in, and then you write content in that place. It doesn't live elsewhere. It's only there, and you can find the people that way, because you're reading the whole forum, and like, you'll find all sorts of people you never knew. But it's always based around some sort of topic. Style of fiction or fan club for a certain movie or TV show or something. But that's another model for this kind of discovery. But it's not a super IndieWeb model. It's like usually it is writing content in a place that is not yours. But
Great. I think our time's up.
We're going to go ahead and start the last session.
Yes.
Because we're getting close to time. And like, get that folks are setting up their party. So it's probably going to be a short session.
oh,
Still have everybody.
Great, thank you.
thank you. Yeah, I forget. Is the last session just one in the middle?
Yes.
Those guys.